ka wai ori te kutu, ko te ata nui. Ka horonia, ko te kore, ko te po, ko te ao, ka awa te ae. Up here the sunrise, up here the dawn, the birds are chattering, the beaks move, the important early morning spreading over the surface of our whenua, our earth. The dawn chorus, from the stillness of the night comes forth the daylight. Ngā mihi nui kia tātou e te iwi mōrena nau mai ki tēnei wāhana hou o Taki Kōrero. Tākai Kōrero. Nau mai and welcome to this first of our Tākai Kōrero series. Ko maraea te pāhau. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy morning and all the mahi to join us today in our whenua session. And a big shout out to those of you who are watching on our Tākai Facebook page too. This session will be recorded whānau for you to watch later or to share with your whānau, colleagues, friends who weren't able to make it today. And know that the recordings will be emailed out to you in the next few days, along with a few of the links that we talk about today. It will also be available on the Tākai website. Now, today we were lucky enough to have 3 ātāhua mārei kura with us in INA to discuss this kaupapa. We have Deb Riwiri is the Brainwave Trust Aotearoa Kaiako. She's passionate about connecting neuroscience and tipuna parenting. For me, she makes neuroscience sexy e te whānau. And Dina Awaro has a background in social work and community development and has lived experience of walking alongside whānau, hapu iwi and her hapori, and many hapori she is leading the Tākai Mōrehi Kaupapa, funded by Tākai Local Initiative Fund. And we have the wonderful Elizabeth Emery Hart as the founder of the Tupuna parenting movement, sharing that gentle and respectful way of tupuna Māori with whānau across the motu. A huge mihi to all the 3 mārei kura here today. Let's get into the kōrero and why we've come today. And I think a big part of that is to really ruku into that big kaupapa of mātauranga Māori. And hea tēnei mea, what is this thing that we talk about around mātauranga? We've had many scholars, we've had many kuia and karaua sharing that taona tuku iho that have come through generations. But I'm going to put that out to our whānau, our beautiful mārei kura that are going to open up this session. And I'm going to let Whaia Deb give us a kōrero about, and it could be around atuatana, around our gods and our goddesses that have guided us here in a lot of that. So tēnei ka mihi kia tātou. Whaia Deb, go into this kaupapa of what is mātauranga Māori?
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou nā manikura e te ake ana e a tātou tamariki mokopuna. Tēnā koe maraea. Well, for me, mātauranga Māori really means the theory of knowledge. So from a cultural context, for me, it's sort of like, what underpins all of that? Where have we got that from? And as you so appropriately put into it, you know, ngā atua. So our tikanga has really been premised off our ability to do our practice-based research. And that research has been around te tai ao. You know, the way that we research is actually by acute observation. Looking around the te tai ao, you know, that's why we can relate it, our Paki Waitara, our Pūrākau, all of these, our tau parapara, they're embedded with the things that we've observed over a millennial of time. And so from that practice-based research, what we now can do is align it to how we raise our mokopuna, our babies, in a way that is really conducive to growing the potential. So if we think about Māori in a cultural context, it's from a growth mindset. And so you wouldn't care naturally for te tai ao if you didn't have that same process in place for tamariki Māori. So that was why when the colonizers came here and they were observing us from their own visceral background, they said things like, when Samuel Marsden said, "I saw no quarreling while I was there. They're kind to their women and children. I never observed either one mark of violence upon them, nor did I ever see a child struck." Or Richard Cruz in 1824 said, "In the manner of rearing children and in the remarkable tenderness and solicitous care bestowed upon them by the parents, no partiality of account of sex was in any instance observed," meaning it didn't matter if they were tamaiti pane or kōtiro tama, they were treated as being special because their wairua was already intact, that was embedded in our mātauranga Māori. So hopefully that's encapsulated a little bit of what my understanding is. And, working with these processes through different things that have been written, is really, really essential, because it's sort of like we do hold the answers. For me, the neuroscience that began to be studied by neuroscientists, early developmentalists, what they have done is create an understanding in a Eurocentric construct why our tupuna were parenting in the way that they were, and gives us more impetus to continue these practices. Kia ora.
And I think, Elizabeth, it really emphasises the mahi that you do around tipuna parenting and that knowledge that was passed down nā kōrero tuku iho from your whānau. And maybe you can talk about how you came about that knowledge and how you put that out to the motu, because Whaia did talk really in depth around what mātauranga Māori is, and this is about how you came by this knowledge.
Kia ora, na mihi nui kia koutou. I guess with the mātauranga that I came across, I guess mātauranga there's different kinds of mātauranga. There's mātauranga a Māori, so kia ora Whaia Deb, tautoko your kōrero. But mātauranga can also be more specifically located. So you can have mātauranga a whenua or mātauranga a whānau. So mātauranga that's associated with the land or a particular area, or mātauranga that's from a specific whānau or hapu or iwi. And so for me, mātauranga a whānau has been a really critical part of tupuna parenting. And of course, my Ngāpuhi side says tupuna, but every time I hear you speak Maraea, my Ngāti Parau ears go, tipuna Lizzie, it's tipuna, ai kia ora, kia ora. Tupuna parenting, the Ngāpuhi dialect won out when I was having those discussions. And so mātauranga a whānau for me has been really grounding in this mahi that I do. And so it's really about those stories from your whānau, from your whakapapa, that connect back to the tupuna ways. So Whaia Deb spoke about some early explorer accounts talking about tupuna ways, and that's absolutely mātauranga in the space. And we have whakatauki, and we have waiata oriori, and we have atua pūrākau that have been passed down, but there's also whānau pūrākau. There's also those whānau oral histories that have been passed down through your whakapapa. So some of those are lived experience. Like for me, we have many stories, for example, of how we acknowledge the tapu of Pepi and Tamariki in our whānau. And so burying the whenua and the pito, the placenta and the cord stump of Pepi after birth, returning the whenua to the whenua is a way that many whānau acknowledge the tapu of Pepi and of childbirth, by returning the whenua to the whenua. And that's something that we've inherited through our whakapapa. My nanny and grandpa never smacked their tamariki or their mokopuna, which is also something that our tupuna never did either, as Whaia Deb said from that Samuel Marsden observation. And we have many other references that we know that our tupuna didn't smack their Pepi and tamariki In pre-colonial times. That was something that was introduced by the Europeans at the time, that you had to use physical force to teach kids a lesson at home and at school. And there was quite an uproar for Māori when that was introduced. And now we've, of course, trying to reclaim that knowledge from our whakapapa. And so my nanny and grandpa never smacked their tamariki or mokopuna, which is a beautiful way of acknowledging the tapu of tamariki, that you protect them. They're not, tapu doesn't mean just sacred. That's quite good for a one-word description. It's also a protection, a restriction, setting something apart. You can have things or places that are tapu, like don't climb that maunga, don't swim in that awa, that river, because it's tapu, but it's also an inherited quality of all people. And it's a quality that deserves respect. And our tūpuna would respect Pēpi and Tamariki for their tapu, because of their tapu, because they are from the atua, from the spirit world, from the gods, and they inherited that tapu from them. Sorry. And so, yeah, stories from your whānau and whakapapa, lived experience, those are really a key way to learn mātauranga a whānau and take lessons from it.
And that's something that you've sort of been part of too, Dina, with, with the mahi that you do with Te Ohi Mōrehu around ori, lullabies, waiata, haka. Talk about some of the, what you did, even with your own tamariki, around building and installing that tikana and mātauranga into your tamariki, because you live away from your papakaina.
Oh, kia ora te whānau, no Ngāti Porou ahau, I te Puaki o ki Waipiro Bay. I see some of my Ngāti Porou whānau in the chat screen. So yeah, I was born and bred on my whenua, and just like what Whaia Deb was saying about, taking our pito back, or our whenua back home to our own lands. So for me, it was important for us to make sure that our kids and our mokopuna were still connected home. So that's what we have done with the whenua. It has gone home. It's buried at our whare in Waipiro Bay. But I think for us at Te Ohi Mōrehu, we see waiata and toi whakaari as ways of connecting back to the past. So mātauranga is about the past, the present, and the future. So I think we use those. We've got skilled people who teach that. Not me. I'm not one of those people. But the toi whakaari side of things and the waiata, and they tell stories like for our tamari, our pipi te ori. When they sing their waiata, they're learning. So they're learning about the past. They could be singing things. They're learning about our atua, about tangaroa. So I think the stories being told through waiata are great for our tamariki to be learning, and that's what we're trying to instill in our whānau. I think the whānau that I work with are quite disconnected from their whakapapa, and it's about finding that, their way back. And as Whaia Liz said that we are there. This is a time when people are trying to get back to their, connect with their whakapapa, trying to look at things. So for the hapu mama, they want to be able to explore traditional ways, but also mix them with the, today's birthing practices. I think that, the concept of using a ipu whenua, of using the mukatais, our young parents are looking at those kind of things as well, but still being engaged in the mainstream systems. But yeah, just, that's the kind of thing. We tell stories through our waiata, through kapahaka, our taiohi, do little whakaari, just around things that they're thinking about in today's world. So kia ora koutou.
Thinking about waiata and stuff, and the beauty of waiata around that transmission of knowledge, you don't have to be the maisirikas, Whaia Deb, because tamariki are all goods when you have an attachment. Is that tika, Whaia Deb?
Aye. It doesn't matter if you're tone deaf. Will your baby be tone deaf too? Probably, but it doesn't matter. The process around our waiata And that was a beautiful one that you started this morning with Maraea. You know, it pulled me back into some of our old kōrero. So bringing those ancient things forward, you know, as one of our Amsteridi talks about, it doesn't matter how far back you go, it's how far forward you can bring it. So for me, the ōriori, what it does inside the brain is it activates, you know, not only in the prefrontal cortex, not only in the language pathways of the brain, but that emotional stuff in the limbic centers of the brain. It's actually activating this joy and harmony that people are enjoying their space with me. And that's what the baby is responding to through their sensory system. And so all of these processes that our tupuna had in place in a modern day context, what it's doing is activating the brain so that, again, this is the growth mindset. And I think it's, as Liz talked about, you know, she said, you know, that there wasn't this calm, embracing space that our mokopuna, that our tupuna provided for our babies, was actually working in harmony with Te Taiao. And it's so significant now as we move into, you know, the maramataka, because a lot of the kura are taking that on board. And so what we can see is actually what we're doing, you know, moving away from the Gregorian calendar and moving actually with how our tupuna, we're actually moving with the seasons. So significantly, as we move into this new year, you know, with Matariki up here, we say Puanga, because that's the, you know, celestial star system that's more present to us here on the East Coast in Te Northa. So for me, yeah, that singing is really, really, you're activating those endorphins, those happy hormones within the baby. Kia ora.
So whānau, as Deb said, you are the whirimako, the rear horse of your pepe's lives, or if you're a papa, you are a catch a fire. So don't be ashamed if you can't waiata, and, you know, celebrate waiata no matter how much, and sharing waiata with whānau is a really good way of installing a mātauranga Māori. I te kāna i te whānau? Pai te rā whakaaro ai. I think one big, you know, something that we continue to talk about, he māma mā tātou. It's easy for us. But what about our whānau that have been disconnected from whakapapa, from te haukaina, from their home fires? How do we ignite their DNA to really want to learn about their whakapapa and themselves when they've gone through so much trauma? And especially as whānau supporters, how do we do that even when whānau who are supporting whānau have gone through that trauma? Shall I chuck it to someone? Kia ora whaia Deb.
I can do a little. Kia ora. With the tupuna parenting mahi, one of the biggest things I've learned is how difficult it can be for whānau to talk about their own childhood or talk about their own whakapapa. And when I'm talking about whānau pūrākau, you'll meet wahine who will say, but I haven't got any good stories in my whakapapa. Or oh, I don't know where I'm from. I've never been to my marae. And those are really hard conversations for them. And so holding that space for them and bringing them, but still bringing them into this kaupapa, it's kind of, even if you don't know, or even if you don't have those stories, we know that our tupuna broadly all did the same thing, more or less. Sure, there'll be some regional variations, but kapai. So you can take inspiration from the broader lessons from our tupuna of how they, in this tupuna parenting space, of how they treated and raised their pepe and tamariki. But also, perhaps that means that you've got an opportunity where you can be the first tupuna in your whakapapa to parent in a different way, to parent the way that our tupuna did, to parent the way that you want to raise your pepe and tamariki. You can choose to be that. And it kind of raises the question of what kind of tupuna do I want to be? How do I want my mokopuna? I tell stories about my nanny all the time as her moko, and so do all of her mokopuna. And how do I want my mokopuna to talk about me? And so that's a question I put on to some of these wahine as well, is to be inspired by our tupuna and to visualize what you want to be and where you want to go. What kind of tupuna are you becoming, and how will your mokopuna remember you, and be driven by those lessons. That's one angle on it. I'm sure Dina and Whaia Deb have another, but
Dina, because you have done a lot of work in the hapori and talking about reigniting that, you know, te mana o te waiata play and all those different kaupapa that we have for our whānau, especially with the whānau whiro that you've been involved with and stuff like that. How do you engage whānau that aren't engaged with mātauranga or whakapapa?
I think it's about giving them that space and having the right space to do it in. You know, we have all these kaupapa around the hapori, but the safest spaces in their own communities. And I think that we do have to acknowledge that there's many people in our hapori that aren't connected home or to the whakapapa. And I think identifying like groups or spaces where they could be, like we have Ngāti Porou Pōneke that do kapaha, you know, they have online classes, inviting people into all these spaces. And they don't have to kōrero, they just need to listen, they can be in and out as they please. That's why I really like Zooming, because you can be in and out, you don't need to be seen, but you have an opportunity to zap in and listen to the kōrero, and that's what I think a lot of our whānau today are trying to do. They're connecting like that because they do feel whakamā about not being in that space. And I think it's about offering a space, like Te Rito is a great space for especially for our rangatahi to come. And it's a space we created because of that, because there weren't spaces where our kids could be who they needed to be. Everything around here in our space connects them to their culture. Like it is a performing arts centre, we call it, but you know, it's not flash, but it connects our rangatahi, because this is a safe, comfortable space for them to be. So I think it is about providing that safe space for our whānau to dip in and out as they feel comfortable.
Ka pai. And Whaia Deb, you've been part of Mahi I Roto i ngā wharehere in the prisons. How are whānau, what is it like delivering in prisons when whānau aren't, and men or wahine aren't in that space to take on this kōrero, or have you had instances?
Yeah, you know, for me it's like when you bring this whole kaupapa into this, you know, whatever the environment is, people are going to take it from their own personal perspective. And I remember one of the tāne said to me, "Oh, Whaia, that was 250 years ago. What does it matter now?" And I said, it matters because you matter. And more importantly, your tamariki matter and your mokopuna matter. And so, and always I talk from the place of, you know, what is the legacy you want to leave? And we can't dismiss hurt is hurt. Hurt people, whatever that may look like, whatever it feels like, we have to be present to that. So I always say, engage your, you know, for me, waking up your DNA, for me, more practically means your prefrontal cortex, which houses our empathy, which houses our compassion, which houses the ability to create a long-term future. That's what I'm meaning. Wake up the prefrontal cortex, which is your whakapapa connection to where you've come from. And where you've come from, if you whakapapa Māori, you're descended from a line of chiefs. And our rangatira never ever saw anybody as being deficit. And this is always the thing that the construct we're having to work against. So, you know, sometimes you don't know what you're going to meet within these places, because I remember one Tāne saying to me one day, he said, you know, I've been to psychologists, psychiatrists, and he looked at me and he said, you see me, don't you? And I said, aye. And he said, you see how I really am? And I said, you know what? I see how clever you are. Your tupuna would be so proud of you. And he said, you know, I'm struggling with this, eh? And I said, aye. And I said, but what I want to acknowledge you for is you keep coming back. And he said, aye. You know, because the resonance of this kōrero, it resonates with us at a cellular level, because, you know, here's a big term, you know, the epigenetics, the whakapapa of who we are in our cellular system comes from our tupuna. And it's sort of like, that's what waking up the DNA is. Somewhere deep within our very being, we understand this. And it's sort of like, if nothing else has made sense before, these pūrākau, these Paki Waitara, these Oriori, suddenly they're meshing with us at this deep level, but they're also activating our brain in a way that it's never been activated before. And I just say, bring it on, karawhiu, mahi a te mahi. There's, you know, as Tahimi said, we've come too far to not go further. We've done too much to not do more. Let's just carry on with this, because as hard as it is, as challenging as it is for some of our whānau, if we can be compassionately with them as they work through this process, they know we're not judging them. We're with you. We understand, you know, and even if we don't understand, we want to be with you as you travel through this process. So if we can deal with our own internal trauma and do our healing, it doesn't mean to say we're all healed. We're never going to heal, you know, we'll be healing till the day we pass on. And but if we can do this, what we're saying to our tamariki, you know, my son always says to me, well, Mum, you yelled at us. And I said, yeah, be better than me, do better than me. You know, what did I know back then, son? You know, and he goes, okay. So for me, it's like acknowledging our own faults and limitations and bringing that to the fore. So, you know, all the parents are the experts in their baby. And I start that first and foremost. I'm not the expert in your tamariki. You are, you know, and I might have some knowledge, but you will have the best knowledge that there is to access from within you. Kia ora.
And I think that's the best thing about mātauranga, and when we're sharing mātauranga, is how it always looks at the positive kaupapa and really whakamana, like builds the mana of parents, caregivers, even kaimahi. When kaimahi have that knowledge, you don't have to be a tohuna, is that right? Do you have to be a tohuna to share mātauranga whānau? E tikana. We don't have to be those tohuna whānau. And so it is about what happens when, you know, whānau, I heard your stories about, you know, when whānau aren't and don't sort of resistant to mātauranga Māori and whakapapa and understanding the importance of that. What happens when our kaimahi, our people that are supporting whānau are on a journey? What things have you seen out there that has supported people on the journey of gaining more mātauranga, or just little bits of to fill their kete? Liz?
Kia ora. I guess with whether it's whānau or kaimahi, it's kind of, you have to be in the right place to be receiving this mātauranga. So you're saying everyone's on a journey. Some people haven't started their journey yet, and that makes the kōrero hard, or it means it's just not the right time. What I talk about with the kaimahi I'm teaching about tupuna parenting kaupapa is doing gentle drops is what I call them. I know I couldn't come up with a better name, but doing a gentle drop to like introduce some of this mātauranga with a whānau, just to see if they are interested, just to see if they are ready, because sometimes they won't be, and they might just give you that blank of, that's interesting. And then you know that they're just not on. But sometimes they'll be like, oh, really? I was thinking about this the other day, and will be really engaged and crack into a really in-depth kōrero. And so sometimes, yeah, you just have to be open to the fact that some people just won't be ready and you can't push it, but you can try and inspire them, or perhaps get them curious, and maybe they'll then have another kōrero with someone else. And next time you come back to that conversation, they're actually a bit more primed. And it could be because you did that teaser, because you asked that question and gave that little introduction. So having those, not giving up after the first kōrero. If you're kaimahi listening to this, if you're kaimahi who support whānau, if that first time you ask, they're really not interested, try again next time. Or give it a couple months and then try again, and give them a little more. And at some point they will be ready, but they won't be ready straight away. Gentle drops, yeah.
We love the gentle drops. Those are nice because it's those little nuggets that we try and drop into them. So I really like the gentle drops. Now, whānau, if you're listening and you have some pātai, remember, go to the bottom of the screen, whānau. There's this little symbol that says Q&A, ana, can you see? Krewai. So put your questions in there. We've got a few questions, but at the end of our kōrero with our panelists, we'll be able to answer those questions. Okay. Now, we've heard a bit about those gentle drops, and it just keep going back, as Liz said. And as Whaia Deb said, right through the kōrero, it's like, just try, and whakapiki te wairua te whānau. It's about building that encouragement, because not enough of our parents are encouraged. And Dina, definitely around, it takes time, but you have to look at where they're going to, the places that they feel safe and secure in. And I think that's a real good space to really transition into, people think about mātauranga. Where do you find this information? Where did you, we heard Liz talked about her whānau tikana, more around mātauranga whānau. Where do whānau go, and whānau who supporters go to get this knowledge?
Kia ora. For me, having been raised, we were pretty much colonised and assimilated into another way of being. So I always say I grew up as a Māori in Ngāti Tū Whare Toa. I have to acknowledge them, because for me, they shared a lot with me. Having grown up in Kororareka, I learned very young when I attended kura who the bad people were and who the good people were. And apparently people who looked like me were all the bad people. I didn't know that. So, changing that that process of, now that Hone Heke is revered as one of our heroes up here, is awesome. And all the tupuna, and having those structures still in place where people have that embedded tikanga with them. Because if you come to the north, you will find no historical whare that have the carvings available. Okay, it's only our modern day whare tupuna that actually have contemporary carvings in there. Does that mean it's all lost? Oh, certainly not. Because the ones, and this is what I'm always challenging our kaumātua, is that a perception from tupuna, or is that something that's been blended with a modern day context, through colonisation? They get a little bit witty with me, but I always think there's always a rationale behind, you know, that understanding. So wherever you're looking for it, and look, we have some amazing written work. You know, I think about Mason Jury, Amster Reedy, and look, there's a wonderful book, Te Whatu Pōkeka. You know, that's really, really awesome in terms of talking about mātauranga Māori, but in a way that connects us to tamariki Māori and how they grow and develop. So, you know, the research you do is actually with the people that you trust around you, and then you grow out. And those are the things that actually are more sense making to me. It's really practical. You know, I go over to Waitangi and I work in the kitchen. I'm not sitting on the taumata, I'm just working in the kitchen. And everyone, when people know who you are, suddenly, you know, because you're helping them in the kitchen, feed the people, you know, it's not like you're not a rangatira or anything, you're just helping there, and you're listening to the kōrero. So those things really equip us well, you know, and I just think we do the practical mahi rather than thinking we've got to, you know, go where all the knowledge makers are, because that will actually, there's knowledge wherever you go, whether it's in the kitchen, scrubbing out the toilets, you know, whatever it is we're doing. I always say, if service is beneath us, then leadership is beyond us. So our people always about kaitiakitanga, that service mentality.
Ka pai. And te reo o te kāuta, going back to our kāuta, going back to our kitchens, and, you know, doing a bit of tītautana, you know, poking up that tītau, as Via Deb says, because from tītautana, you'll get all that beautiful kōrero and whakapapa stories. And that's also building that when we think about brain development, whakapapa is brain development whānau, and understanding that. Dina, and you've been in a space where, you know, where you see young people and where they get their knowledge. When we're talking about mātauranga, where have they got that knowledge that are doing all this awesome kaupapa around sharing the knowledge to their own peers?
Yeah, I think our rangatahi today are real clever and onto it when it comes to whakapapa stuff, because they have been, they've got the opportunities out there. We've got kura, we've got, you know, kohanga, they've been embraced in that space. For my kids, they went right through kohanga, kura, and then went to St. Hatohopera. And I think for them, they're quite knowledgeable about their own whakapapa on the Ngāti Porou side, I must say. I don't know on the father's side yet. They're seeking that. But I think there's lots of information out there. We have whānau, we have the best people to talk to are your kuia, your kaumātua, and they love talking. They can tell you lots of things from mai rā noa, what they know. But I think that for our rangatahi, they're embracing their culture now. I guess like probably my generation, I think we need to go back. You know, that book, the How to Be a Good Ancestor. I want to be a good ancestor. But for a lot of our whānau, they have to go back a few generations to find a good ancestor. And so for us today, we want our kids or ourselves to be those ancestors for the future generations. But I think there's lots of information. I think talking to people is the great way to go about seeking that support and stuff. Just having kōrero, sitting down, taking time. We know that time is precious. You know, everyone's always so busy, but I think that's really important that we do take the time and kōrero. You know, my nan was Niuean and brought up on the East Coast. She had some wonderful stories. I still remember those stories from when she was growing up. And she was brought to New Zealand from Niue because her parents were sick. So, and she lived down Ngaitahu. So, yeah, I just think that the kōrero is the way to go rather than looking on the net. So yeah, that's probably where I'm coming from.
Oh. And what about you, Liz?
Well, I spoke a little bit before about, mātauranga whānau, getting stories, lived experience stories from your whakapapa as a way of finding mātauranga. And I'll take this kōrero a step further, which is, have you ever asked your nanny, your kuia or your koro, about their kuia or koro? Have you ever asked them what they remember? Because even those little stories that they might remember are absolute gold, and you are hearing history, because you'll be hearing a story about someone who probably lived in the 1800s. And so whether it's I had a story shared with me by Kaimahi last month, where she asked her koro about his grandfather, and he said, oh, I don't remember much, but I remember he used to sit and talk with me about the birds. Oh, sorry. And it's just such a simple little thing, but it was a piece of gold. It was such a taonga. And I don't have my grandparents or my parents anymore, and I wish I could ask them. And so I put the rākau out to you. If you guys have your kuia or your koro or your parents, and that you ask them those stories, because they are taonga. And so I get the stories where I can now from my, I still have elders in my whānau, of course, and kaumātua in my hapu and such. But those little stories are just as valuable as any of the big stories that are written in books. And so it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be big stories. They can just be little memories, but even those little memories can be beautiful. And so that's what I put out to you all today.
Tēnei ka mihi kia koe te tuahine. And beautiful kōrero. Kia ora tuahine. Kia ora. But it is those small stories.
Yeah. Kia ora, I just want to acknowledge Liz for that. You know, for me, I talk to my tupuna. They've never left me. They sit on my shoulders, always. So kia ora to you, Liz. You know, and if I'm struggling with something, I turn to them and I say, okay, tupuna, come on down. And I know, you know, in a European way, they say, you're hearing voices. I go, aye, tika tau, I'm hearing my tupuna voice. I said, they're guiding me in a way that they've never left, you know, so yes, even though they've departed from the physical realm, and that's, you know, for me, we have so much richness in our tikanga, because it's sort of like, I remember a cousin one day, he said to, you know, he was explaining this to a Pākehā, you know, the kāranga, the wahine saying, come in and have a cup of tea. And I turned to him and I said, I beg your pardon. I said, we are the portals that open up the doorway to the celestial realm. That's what a kāranga does. And I just said, we're asking our tupuna to come and be with us, and your tupuna, you know, everybody's tupuna. And I just said, they're just beyond the veil. And so for me, physically, they may not be in the same realm that I'm inhabiting, but they certainly have never left. And those lessons, and I always say to whānau who have been badly damaged through trauma, and they say, I can't remember a good time that I've ever had fire, I say to them, imagine how you wanted it to be. Imagine your tupuna and what you wanted them to give to you. And, you know, creating that space within, again, I talk about the brain because it's their whakapapa stuff, their awakening. They begin to say, this is what I wanted, this is what I needed. Okay, so bring that into the conversation, because the more they focus on the trauma, the more it gets activated. And so I'm not saying to deny it. We can't deny trauma's trauma. But if we want to paint a new pathway forward, then what is it you can imagine with you embracing? Imagine what your tupuna wanted you to have. Because when a baby is born, no one says, oh, great, a life to stuff up. Nobody says that. But we know that hurt people because they haven't dealt with their own trauma. And so it's creating these processes of building another whare where they can reimagine how it could have been and then to embed that. Ka pai? Does that make sense?
Ka pai. And those are beautiful kōrero to really get us in that space. Yes, our tipuna are always with me and always with us. Our kuia that have passed on, our fathers, our mothers, and different people that have cared for us as adults, as tamariki, and guided us through that time. Whānau, we're going to actually go into a few pātai time. And we're going to go and answer some of the pātai. Remember, you can use the Q&A if you have any pātai for the panel. And we're going to go to Mai Niue, I think that's how you say your name, Mai, aroha mai. And she says, and Mai says, kia ora, can reawakening the DNA in the prefrontal cortex heal some of the neuro damage that's been done by early trauma? And can it start a cycle for the future of healing of intergenerational hurt? I'll chuck that to you, Whaideb.
Ai, tika tau. Yes. You know, for me, this practice-based research that our tupuna did, I remember working with a karaua once and I said to him, Koro, I noticed that this is a year that I went into SIFs and I thought I could change the whole system. That never worked for me. But anyway, this koro, I said to him, I noticed you take that tama fishing. And he said, aye. And I said, when do you get to the problem? And he said, here's the interesting thing, Deb. He said, I teach them how to tie a fly and teach them how to fish. He said, generally by the second day, he said, the rangatahi will say to me, Koro, do you know why I'm here? And he goes, no, boy, you tell me why I'm here. And so he said that process, and I think each of us in our own way, in terms of the practices that we've done, we allow that compassion to be there. We allow our presence. It's not so much about what we say, it's how we listen. Remember, one mouth, two ears. It's how we listen to people. It's how we create a process so that I'm here, I'm prepared to listen. I'm not going to offer you a solution because I believe in you that you have the power to make the changes that you want to make. So yes, the more you can activate that prefrontal cortex, and guess who we have to have compassion for mostly? For ourselves. Most of these people are sinking. Remember, guilt is when you can correct something. Shame is like a korowai that covers us and pulls us down into the depths of our being where we can't see a way out of. And so we need to actually help uplift our whānau in a way that is hapai hoki. We uplift them with mātauranga Māori. It's the only process that will work for us, whānau.
Ka pai. A question going out to you, Dina. What have been some ways you have supported whānau parents that live in spaces where drugs are heavily impacted in the development of our mokopuna, tamariki mokopuna?
Oh, you have to give me a hard one.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a hard one.
Well, you know, that is a real thing in communities across our country. I guess it's about finding them the support. Like, for instance, within our community, we recognised that that was an issue, so we started a support group. It was around peace, so we opened up a table for whānau to come and kōrero. So some of the time people don't, a lot of whānau just, it's affecting them and there's no one to talk to, and they don't want to talk about it because it might get their kids in trouble. They don't know where to go. So that was one of the things. We identified an issue which we addressed by doing that. But I think it is a difficult space to be, but it's about finding that support for the whānau. I mean, everybody wants to do good by their kids, regardless of what they are actually doing. Everybody wants to be good parents, and they want to their kids to have a real great life. But it's, you know, some of the stuff for them they haven't addressed. So I guess we've got to find that support. We, as kaimahi, we have to find the right spaces for them to be able to address those issues. And I guess, yeah, I think it's a difficult space, because even as kaimahi going into home, you never know what you're going to come up against.
And our last question we're going to have now, because we'll probably have to answer the rest later on, whānau, and some have been already answered, is how would you recommend protecting our hearts, our wairua hinenaro, when we support whānau in difficult situations that can trigger, you know, mai anxiety, and how do we protect ourselves without hardening our own hearts? How can we keep going, keep serving and keep sharing in awhi and mātauranga and manakitanga by triggering, this person is, Ash is referring to violence and low socioeconomic situations and trauma and addiction. What happened to your tupuna and stuff like that. So how do we protect our hearts as kaimahi and our mahi, and so don't have the hardened hearts?
For me, it's always like, you know, what's the pure? You know, how do we, you know, call on our wairua away? And, you know, part of this mātauranga Māori is, do we begin with a karakia? You know, even if our whānau are feeling a little bit wiri and, oh, geez, we don't do that. Well, kia ora whānau, I'm going to begin with one. You know, so we begin with a karakia. We may introduce a simple, you know, waiata, te aroha. Most people will resonate with that. And people say, don't you feel whakama if you're singing? I said, of course I do. But I said, I don't let that stop me. And then in a way, if some of the kōrero is heavy, then we need to be able to have a way of grounding that information. And some of the practical application is when someone's trawling through their own stuff, is I can see that they're lost in the space of that. And I will say to them when I'm, you know, with them, is like, so, you know, pulling them back into present time, because you don't want to leave them, you know, crawling around in that past. You say to them, oh, what's that photo over there about? So what, in a practical measurement, what you're doing is actually pulling them back into present time and concrete time. So for me to even say, can we go outside and stand on Papa Tuanuku and do our final closure karakia there and finish with the waiata? You know, most people will actually allow you and be guided by you. I'm always amazed because, you know, once you start with that compassion, with that empathy, people will have an understanding. I'm not doing it to you. I'm being with you. I'm present to the stuff that's happening for you, but I'm going to take the guide lead. And so for all the kaimahi out there, practice those things in a way that you feel okay. However small the karakia is, however small the waiata is, however small the grounding, you will soon pick up that the whānau feel confident and feel your competence in what it is you are shaping and forming for them. But what you're doing is building more mātauranga Māori, and that's the key. Kia ora.
Awe. And I'm going to answer one more question, and it's if a child is born in emergency cesarean, can we still practice mātauranga Māori? You can, whānau. You know, even if you're not in the room, you can still do the karana ki tō pepe, karana our baby, and karakia, ruruku, all those beautiful things, you know, and when pepe comes out, putting baby up into the four winds, so we can still participate in all of that tikana. Remember, tikana is tika, which is doing good in action. So you're doing something good and activating that action. So you can take tikana in different realms. E te whānau, we've come to the end of Tākai Kōrero. It's all about sharing some practical rauimi, some tools to build your kete, and here's a few rauimi that we want to share. The Whakatipu Suite gives you a taster around tikana Māori, but a real light touch and how you can apply that for whānau. Our tūpuna parenting website with a beautiful Liz, go there and find out lots of information, including awesome videos that she created with our friends from Talking Matters, whakapapa, movement, whānau stories, all those beautiful knowledge and kōrero that you heard today. Maramataka with Heni Hotirini, who speaks on Facebook. There's lots of great whānau pages sharing this knowledge around mātauranga Māori. Heni shares her Indigenous knowledge every day, every morning, what's happening in the moon phases and what you can be part of. Don't forget, we do have heaps of kaupapa coming up. If you've enjoyed today, we've got a session coming up and it's called the Ruku session. Next month on 20th of July, 10 a.m. we will dive into some of the kaupapa that you heard today, and we'll share some ideas and build some connections. This is sort of a workshop-y kaupapa, and we'll be with whānau supporters, so yourselves. So don't forget to register. We do have a registration of 100, so get in fast, whānau. But I want to send out a big mihi. Tēnei ka mihi kia koutou wakumārei kura I whāngai mai I ngā kōrero ātāhua nei I te ata nei. I'd really like to acknowledge the beautiful kōrero from Whaia Deb, Liz and Dina today, and shared their knowledge, shared their own whānau stories, but also got us excited about how we can awaken our own DNA and how we can support whānau in that space. So e te whānau, e nā mārei kura, tēnei ka mihi kia koutou, nā mihi nui, nā kai whakarono. I want to also acknowledge everyone that came in part of this kōrero. We will be answering your questions. Tēnei ka mihi kia tātou katoa, kia ora. Nā mihi, ka kite.